On today's show, we're back. It's trade deadline dash season, a podcast every day until the trade deadline. We're doing part 2 of our conversation with Jake Fischer from Bleacher Report about the rumors around the Dallas Mavericks. And then we'll bring our analysis and talk about, should the Mavericks go after some of these guys? Do they have to now that the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade has happened? So we'll talk about all that with Jake and each other on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good!
And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager from the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Mavs your first listen every single day. We are free and available on all platforms. All right. Today, we're doing part 2 of our interview with Jake Fischer. If you missed part 1, go listen to the second half of yesterday's podcast where we were talking about the All-Star starters, the voters, and all that. But this is the second half of my conversation with Jake Fischer. If you want to, go to YouTube, search the chapters, and they will be there for easy access for you on these. So let's hear from the guy, Jake Fischer, Bleacher Report, about all the rumors surrounding the Dallas Mavericks, and then you'll hear from us on those. You mentioned John Collins in the first segment. You reported, Collins has a lot of fans around the league. Dallas has been frequently linked to him, in the past. The Hawks are in this really weird situation where, they if the season ended right now, they wouldn't be in the play-in. How desperate is a team like that going to be? And what does desperate look like for a team like the Hawks? Would they just be willing to, we got to make some kind of shakeup, we got to do something and trade John Collins, or are they still going to hold their pieces close to the vest?
They're not holding their pieces close to the vest right now. They're calling around on John Collins. I think Danilo Gallinari's name has been very, very available. Bogdanovich's name sounds very available. I don't think Kevin Huerter to a lesser extent, DeAndre Hunter definitely to a lesser extent being available, but they're listening and they're open to listening on everyone outside of Trey and Clint, from my understanding, and they're being active in making calls on John and other dynamics. So, hell yeah, they're trying to get better. This is a team that made the Eastern Conference Finals last year. They paid all these guys. They handed over the reins to Nate McMillan, and they're invested in this group. So they got to figure out a way to inch back closer to where they were last year, or else they're going to be in some trouble moving forward. So yeah, I wouldn't say they're desperate, but I haven't talked to anybody there who sounds desperate.
Jake, please, we need somebody.
Yeah. But they're looking to do stuff for sure.
Interesting. The John Collins fit with Porzingis never seemed like something that was a great fit. It seemed like it was okay, but to me, I think they would have to try and maybe move on from Porzingis to get a John Collins. Do you see some kind of deal centered around that the Hawks would be interested in, or do you think Collins' value is too high for some sort of KP Collins move?
I don't have it verified how much he is going for, but I don't think if they're actively calling on him, the price can't be that high. It really can't. They never really had great interest in signing him to that contract anyway, right? I've been writing that all along, where they were difficult negotiations, and he wanted 4 over 20, and he only got 5 125, which I get it, only $125 million.
Yeah, right. Sounds nice
for John Collins, but think back to Gordon Hayward in Utah, where he went out and got his offer sheet, and then the Jazz never really offered for him. And then flash forward a couple years later, when he's the big fish of free agency, he left for Boston. John Collins, I think in a similar sense, has never really felt fully valued by the Hawks. So I think he's open to new scenery. They definitely seem to be looking to move him. So I can't imagine. The price for John Collins right now, from my understanding, sounds lower than the price for Miles Turner or Domantas Sabonis or Jeremy Grant.
Some of these players, it's so hard to find the right fit, right? John Collins doesn't fit as well as a Jeremy Grant or even a Miles Turner. You just know cleanly where those other guys seem to fit. Yeah, you mentioned Jeremy Grant here. Your colleague over at Bleacher Report, Eric Pincus, talked about the Mavericks as maybe a dark horse interested in Jeremy Grant. The package he mentioned was Dorian and Dwight Powell. I don't think that gets it done for Jeremy Grant. How far off is that kind of a package for a guy like Jeremy Grant?
He's been, definitely he fits everywhere, right?
Right.
And that's why we've seen over a dozen teams linked to him. It's going to be pricey to get him. I don't I'll be curious to see what the ultimate price is, because there is such a wide market. But the offers that we're hearing right now haven't really been too incredible. It's been the Jazz, Joe Ingles, and their 2027 first, or whatever that pick is. It's been the Lakers' future first and THT and Kendrick Nunn. And the Bulls don't want to put Patrick Williams on the table. Atlanta, I don't know for certain what their offer has been, but I've been told that DeAndre Hunter is not the piece that they'd want to send out for Jeremy. So John Collins would seem to be the only likely piece that would fit the Pistons' asking price of wanting a young player or a first. So, are they willing to give a first and John Collins to go get Jeremy Grant? I don't know about that. They just got that extra pick back from the Knicks. So
for Reddish,
maybe that's a pick they would be willing to part with. But yeah, I'm just curious to see. It's going to be a bidding war, and there's going to be a ton of teams, and it's going to come down to which team ultimately puts most of the chips on the table. I'd imagine Portland. I was saying this earlier. The Pistons had interest in Powell and free agency, so I can't imagine the Blazers are they're rushing to get put Nasir Little or Anthony Simons on the table. So it would make sense that Norm Powell is the guy they're trying to get moved there. So the Pistons have a variety of different options they're going to be able to choose from, and they could also just keep Jeremy Grant. He could be an integral piece that they brought him in to begin with. So yeah, there's a lot of different outcomes that can stem from his trade candidacy, if you will.
Coming up, we'll end here on the Boston Celtics. We'll get into Marcus Smart, and then Dennis Schroeder has been linked to the Mavericks as well. We'll talk about that situation with them. We'll talk about that with Jake coming up. All right, Jake, let's get into our last team here, the Boston Celtics. They're also in a weird spot. Not maybe as desperate as the Hawks would be, but they're 500. It seems like they're wanting to shake things up. There's all these kind of rumors and reports around them. Your colleague Eric Pincus from Bleacher Report connected the Mavericks and Marcus Smart. That's also been linked in the past. He was a guy that's from Dallas, and we've seen him around these parts. And then Dennis Schroeder, from your reporting, is also, there's a strong possibility that Boston is trying to trade him. They can't re-sign him because they don't want it. They're trying to avoid the tax, and so they don't want to re-sign him and keep him next season. And the Mavericks have been linked to them. What are the possibilities of those two guys getting dealt? And then do you think the Mavs would still be interested in those guys?
So it's Smart and Schroeder, right?
Right.
Yeah. I heard from an outside Dallas source that they had poked around on Smart. The Mavericks pushed back on that when I asked them about that yesterday. I think Boston is calling around and trying to see what Smart can get them. I wouldn't be surprised if they called Dallas, and that's where that came from, the Dallas interest, that it came from the Celtics interest in trying to make moves there. And obviously there's synergy in those two front offices from the Josh Richardson trade that you mentioned up top. But Schroeder, I think, is probably far more realistic in terms of a Dallas marriage, if you will. From the stuff I've heard that the Celtics are thinking Smart can get them, I don't know if there's a player on the Mavericks roster that they would trade Marcus Smart for, or maybe there'd be two pieces that they'd want to get back for him. I think they're using Smart, or trying to use Smart, to get a third guy for Tatum and Brown of sorts, or to get two more solid rotation pieces to grow alongside those guys. I don't really know how that puzzle fits the Mavericks pieces, right?
Right.
Is Maxi Kleba and someone else, going to really move the needle for Boston? I'm not so sure, but it could happen. I think a lot of teams in the league would love to have Marcus Smart on their team. So
sure.
There's going to be a pretty robust interest for him. I'll be curious to see where he does end up going if he does get moved.
We talked about on yesterday's show a Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jalen Brunson for Marcus Smart and Dennis Schroeder type trade, where the Celtics get the point guard that could possibly help run that offense a little bit around those two wings, and then the Mavericks get a sort of replacement with Dennis Schroeder for Jalen Brunson, and then Tim Hardaway Jr. and Marcus Smart get flipped out, and that's a big plus for the Mavs defensively. How far off do you think a deal is like that? Who says no on that one?
Can you give me the terms again?
Yeah. Jalen Brunson and Tim Hardaway Jr. for Marcus Smart and Dennis Schroeder.
I would be surprised if Dallas wanted to do that.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, but they love Jalen Brunson, like we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad deal. Like I think Dallas is having a meeting over it to kind of use that proverbial. I think they're thinking about it. But Luka, by all accounts, loves playing with Tim. You're sacrificing shooting in that situation. Yep. I don't think Dennis or Marcus are known as being knocked down guys, and Luka needs shooters around him. I feel like that deal is more of making a trade for making a trade's sake rather than definitively trying to upgrade your roster. I mean, it's not impossible. It doesn't strike me right away, though, as something that I think the Mavericks would be pretty excited by.
Interesting. Let's end here. Is there anything else you're hearing about the Mavericks? Is there anybody else, a name connected? Is there something that we're not touching on here? Is there anything else you've heard around them?
I mean, the Dragic stuff, like we talked about earlier, is still looming out there like a big white whale.
Are they still wanting to trade him, or are they just like waiting around and they're just going to buy him out? And the Mavs are just like, we'll wait.
Yeah, I think it's going to be virtually identical to the Andre Drummond situation last year, where they would love to get a second-round pick and something back for him. I mean, there could still be opportunities. Like, I've kind of floated this idea. This is not sourced by any stretch, but it's like an educated guess of a possibility that could happen. Like, if the Clippers wanted to send Eric Bledsoe and a second-round pick to get Goran right now, have him in their system and get a point guard that they've kind of been needing and have him locked in for his bird rights to bring him at a lower number next season, that makes a lot of sense to me. But outside of that, or a deal like that where a team wants to just improve on the margin and just get the guy that they think they can add him. I mean, Dallas, for example, right? Like, they haven't had any need to go out and make that deal because everyone just expects them to get bought out. So
yeah, right.
I don't think outside of that type of some team is saying like, I want to go, but it's going to take $20 million of outgoing salary and draft capital to go get Goran Dragic. That's a steep price to pay. So he could get moved. I still doubt it. And I still think it's something that, I mean, a lot of people in the league still expect at the end of the day for him to get bought out. Dragic would head to Dallas in that scenario. The other talk about Dallas is people have definitely noticed their defensively. The fact that they've become a legitimate, stopping unit around Luka has been as key an ingredient as anything, I think, of them making the strong push that they've had in 2022 so far. So that's kind of wraps it up on all the Mavs stuff out there.
Do people believe in the Mavs defense, or are they saying, oh, this is kind of smoke and mirrors? They've played this, weird schedule. Players have been out here and there. Do teams out there, are they believing and thinking it's a legitimate defense, or is it more of a, like, oh man, the Mavs are like a real legit defense, and this is what Jason Kidd has done with this almost the same roster as what Rick Carlisle had is real?
I haven't heard anyone pound on their chest saying the Mavs are the greatest defensive team in the world. I haven't heard people poking holes in it. No. So, and team people love to poke holes in other teams.
Yeah, I bet.
So the fact that hasn't come up yet is at least a good sign, I guess.
That's good. Jake Fischer, you can go check out his work on Bleacher Report. Again, the book, you can go check it out. It's on his Twitter page, a pinned tweet. If you want to go check it out about all the tanking stuff. The Mavs were there not too long ago. The Mavs were in that whole thing, and we were dealing with tanking and doing draft profiles in January and all that. Jake, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Nick.
All right, coming up, Isaac and I are breaking down all the rumors and stuff that Jake Fischer had to say over these last two parts of this interview. But before we do, let me tell you about betonline.ag. It's the fastest and easiest way to put down some money on sports. You can go ahead and check out the games for tomorrow. They're coming in, man. Like, these games are happening. You can also check out basketball games. You can check out the constant every day, the NBA. You can also go, if you want to check out player props, go to sports, go to player props, and you can do live things. Like right now, I could go and I could put in the amount of touchdowns that some of these guys would catch. Okay, if I want one touchdown for Jamar Chase, that's minus 111. If I want 2 touchdowns, that's plus 450. So if I think Jamar Chase is getting 2 or more touchdowns, I put down $100. I could win at $450 on that. So there's all kinds of different things if you search around the website. So go search around it. Use the promo code LOCKEDON to get a 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, Isaac Harris. Now we've heard both parts of our interview with Jake Fischer about the rumors surrounding the Mavericks. Give me your thoughts. I thought the most interesting thing to me about all that was the way he talked about John Collins. Because to me, I felt like John Collins would have more value than Kristaps Porzingis. And I didn't get that from the way that he was talking about him.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that he said that, Atlanta called Dallas as of, late to kind of say,
recently,
I'm paraphrasing his exact words on that, but just to see like, hey, what's up with this, to see their interest, here lately. And I thought, your question asking about the value of it was his response to it is something that I don't think a lot of people think of very often, of him saying, well, if they're actively calling other people, then that shows you the value of somebody, right? Because if you have somebody that's like super valuable, then everybody's like blowing up your phone all the time asking for him,
which is what people are doing about Brunson right now. Brunson, everybody's calling the Mavericks. That's what he said. He said everybody that's calling the Mavericks is asking about Brunson. The phone's ringing off the hook. People asking about Brunson because he has value.
Yeah. So when he said that about Collins, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's something. I mean, I forget that sometimes when I think of, oh, they're actively calling me. I don't really put 2 and 2 together of like, oh, dang, their value must suck right now. So yeah, I just found that appealing. He talked about the interest in Collins that Dallas has had interest before, but that also dated back to the past regime here in Dallas with Donnie and them. So how does this current regime view, somebody like John Collins? I'm just so intrigued with what his value is across the league, because he's still 24 years old. He just signed that massive extension, so he's making a ton of money.
That an extension that the Hawks did not want to sign him to and kind of reluctantly did, which is one of the reasons why they've been shopping him, which I found interesting about that.
Yeah, so I was trying to pull up his exact numbers here for exactly how much he's on the books for the next 5 years. I think he signed it. Yeah, he signed that big extension. So he makes 23.5 next year, and then he makes 25.3, then 26.5, and then in 2025 he makes 26.5 again. So it's not like he's making like 35 or 40. He's not making Westbrook money. So
or Porzingis money even. I mean, he's making significantly less than Porzingis. So sometimes we compare the two guys, but he's making way less, like almost 11 million less than him.
Yeah. So I like John Collins. I like his game. I think that was one of the takeaways from that conversation with Jake is, his value might be pretty low right now.
Pretty like lower than we thought. And
yeah,
the Hawks are calling about everybody. The Hawks are in a situation where now they've won 5 straight games, and things change and ebb and flow. He also said that. Speaking of the ebb and flow, I found it interesting. This is a little Mavs related, but about how a player's value changes so quickly, right? Like a Tim Hardaway Jr. as a guy that the Pelicans wanted to sign to this big deal. And now all of a sudden he doesn't shoot well this year and his value would go way down. Now he's injured and out now. So that's very different. But a guy like that, like if Porzingis had just like a really solid, really good run here, then maybe that changes his value. It's so crazy how it just changes so fast. It seems like it changes really fast for fans, but it also does for the actual front offices too.
Yeah, well, even the team, like in their stance on the deadline, like he was talking, full disclosure again, I know we said it on yesterday's pod, but that conversation between Nick and Jake happened before the Tim Hardaway injury. Yeah. So if it did overlap any in this pod, but I thought it was interesting when he said, even the intel on Dallas has changed over the past like 10 days. It's like you talk about how like a player's value changes so fast. It seems like, the way he's talking, it's like even Dallas and like what teams are, talking with Dallas and how they're viewing their players is even looks like they're changing because, we've been asking the question is, okay, well, will this current streak right now, will this current Mavs team, this run that they're on, this defense, everything, will it change how they view their team? Will they want to keep everybody together even more? And that's kind of what, when he was talking about those 3 role guys of Brunson and Dorian Finney-Smith and Maxey as hey, yeah, like Dallas, they've kind of backed off a little bit. They value those guys a lot. People wanting, Jalen Brunson, people are wanting Dorian. He made that line that, some teams around the league think that Dorian is more available than Brunson in that. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see. It should be interesting.
The Boston guys, I also find interesting too. I pitched him our Brunson and and Tim Hardaway Jr. trade for Marcus Smart and for Dennis Schroeder. Now that trade probably changes with the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade, but he said, I don't know why the Mavericks would do that deal, which says to the value of Brunson because teams value Marcus Smart a lot too.
Well, when he said, I think it's one of the first questions, it was probably on yesterday's podcast, but when he said the line of how, you asked him basically like, what's the league think of Brunson, these guys right now for the Mavs? And when he threw out there that, teams, the league could be viewing him in that, Fred VanVleet category of point guards, down the road, that really, really good point guard, not top 5 point guard in the league, but VanVleet might be an all-star this year, all-star reserve coming off the bench. So like if he reaches that VanVleet level, is if that's how teams are potentially viewing him around the league, then that's where that situation we've been talking about that you kind of scared a little bit, what the summer could look like. You guys both talked about the Knicks as that team that, it's like, hey, there's been basically one team that he has heard on record, that has been linked to Brunson and stuff for all the connections we've talked about.
Yeah. I think now with the Tim Hardaway Jr. injury, I can't see a move with the Celtics unless it's just for Schroeder, right? Unless it's just a small move to bring him in, but I'd still be down for that move to bring in Schroeder.
Well, okay. So something that we didn't talk about the other day, and it's something the Mavs have in their back pocket, is that traded player exception. They still have that. It's a little over $10 million. When you look across the league, you look at some guys, you look at some vets, let's just say the Dragic thing doesn't work out. There isn't a buyout. Dragic can't come here, but they're like, you know what? We need a vet. Oh, we need a point guard off the bench to kind of, run some offense, score a little bit. Like, I know it's not the sexy move in the world, but if you just absorb Schroeder into that, that TPE, Schroeder makes what, $4-5 million. Like his contract his contract can fit into that. Very easy transaction. Another guy that fits into it, Kemba Walker. Like, if that whole thing with New York, I think it's Brian Windhorst is like, hey, New York's out there trying to, clear up a spot for Cam Reddish in the rotation. Kim has obviously been kind of, hit or miss as far as what his minutes look like. But if New York's just looking to just dump him off on somebody, and it's like, hey, somebody can just take him. We want to create another rotation spot. His contract fits right into that traded player exception. So if it's like at the last moment, I mean, we know how we feel about Kemba this year, but if it's at the last moment, Dallas hasn't done anything, and they ship off like a second for Kemba Walker, basically for free to go into the, the TPE to have Kemba come off the bench in that Dragic role that we've been, thinking about, sign me up. I'm fine with that.
It seems far-fetched to be like, oh, they're just going to dump Kemba. But like, he grew up in Brooklyn. He's like a real kind of fan favorite there before he came and played there. They may want to do right by him. That may be, that comes into factor with some of these things too, where they want to do right by him. They don't want to be known as, well, the team that screwed Kemba Walker and just benched him.
They didn't give up anything for him.
Yeah, and then they didn't even make the play in. You know what I mean, right? Like they don't want to be that team. So that could happen in that situation. That traded player exception is somewhat of an asset that we haven't really talked about a lot. Yeah, that, I think could really come into play here. Is there any other teams, now that we're talking about this, any other teams or players that you're watching now that we've had a couple of days to think on these?
I mean, I'm just so sick and tired about the Ben Simmons stuff.
No, he's not getting moved, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really curious on what the deadline's going to look like, right? If he doesn't get moved, you look at the situation in Indiana. If Sabonis doesn't get moved, Turner is his injury make him, is he not going to get traded? I thought it was interesting how you just casually threw in there like, yeah, Dallas is, I heard the same thing. They've backed off their pursuit of Miles Turner and LeVert, and he just kept on. I'm like, LeVert. Like,
yeah, LeVert too. They're out on.
I was like, they were.
Well, I took that as, and I took the Stein quote as I thought about it a little bit more. the Mavericks came in and said, "Hey, we got these players to offer." And so the front office went down to Rick and they're like, "Hey, what do you think about these players?" And Rick's like, "Oh no, not none of those." Like, "Oh no. And then they're like, "Okay, well, the Mavericks have backed off their pursuit." "Oh, did they?" They backed off because Rick Carlisle said he didn't want any of those players. That seems to be the thing that went down with Indiana.
Yeah, so I mean,
Portland, the team that the Mavs just played the other night, Portland, they've got all these guys. What are they going to do? Nas Little is now injured. And so does that change some of the things that they were going to do? CJ McCollum, is he going to be on the move? There's some rumblings about him with a trade, as there seems to always be. Always. Could it be with the Mavericks? Who knows? But there's a lot of stuff to be watching out for.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I mean, we're doing the trade deadline dash. This pod's out on Saturday. We'll be back at it, for a Sunday pod tonight. Rick Carlisle, the Pacers are in town. That very, very team there. Miles Turner is going to be enjoying being back in Dallas. We'll welcome Rick back to the AAC tonight.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be some type of tribute and stuff for Rick tonight. Be curious to see, Luka and them's interactions with him. See if, Luka chirping a little bit. Rick has had a history in the past, of chirping with some players on the court here and there. So it'll be something fun to watch. And then we're back in the groove. I mean, at this point, we're a week and a half away from deadline. I mean, it's just going to be rumors that Monday, like 2 days from now on Monday, there'll be some pieces dropping, some Shams inside pass. Maybe Jake will
drop his intel bucket or whatever he calls it.
That'll be a good Monday thing, and we'll have another round of rumors, and we'll have you covered.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go, guys. That's our podcast. We'll be back tomorrow breaking down the who do the Mavs play tomorrow? Mavs play the Magic. We'll break down that game for sure, and the Pacers game. We'll break down all those games. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.